With Valentine's coming around the corner, obviously the topic of love is definitely eminent. And I felt that what better way to incorporate this holiday and all of these perceived notions and kind of things that are forced upon us by society, integrate that into our careers and how they affect it. And I feel like, especially in our 20s, there's a lot of fear around making the right decision, knowing the right timeline, fear of choosing the wrong occupation, commitment to a job, really a hard one. And I know that I can spend hours thinking about, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Should I be doing more? Am I not doing enough? And then also this fear of asking for support because of the need to be so independent about paving your own way, working from the ground up, and doing all these accomplishments. Yeah, and it feels sometimes, I know for myself, that asking for help can feel a little bit like you have failed because you need somebody else to help you on the journey of becoming and things like that. Maybe it's not that you have a career indecision problem, maybe it's the attachment pattern. Welcome back to Clearly Becoming. Previously, it was Her Career, Her Way. And this podcast is all about empowering ambitious individuals in navigating their career, their growth, their landscape, their personal development by giving them the strategies, tools, and honest conversations. As a 20-something-year-old, I definitely understand the hardships of just navigating your journey and figuring out what you want. And so I hope this podcast is helpful to inspire you and gain a little bit more clarity on the way to your becoming. So Valentine's Day is approaching. Well, I'm filming this episode. Maybe it's already happened when I release it. But I still think the topic of love and relationship is definitely on top of our minds as just humans. We crave connection and things like that. And I think it's really interesting that we tend to separate love and work a lot. And we don't want to mix the two because of just professional reasons and just, it's you normally separate them. But the thing is that the brain does not separate love and work. And it's the same system that bonds you to people, bonds you to goals, bonds you to identities, titles, whatever it might be. And so I really wanted to tie in the theory that I'm sure a lot of people know about called the attachment theory into your career and how it affects different facets of your life. And for those of you who don't know about the attachment theory, I'm just going to do a very quick summary of it. But it was founded by Bowlby. And what happened is that you have three types. So it's secure, anxious, avoidant. And then I think there's another one called disorganized, which is avoidant and anxious. I'm not too sure about that, but he did a study, an experiment basically, where it was a mother and a child, and they're in a room. And when the mother leaves and the baby cries, and then the mother comes back and the baby is okay, it stops crying and is able to do whatever it was doing before, playing, whatever, that is a secure attachment style. However, if the mother leaves, the baby cries, and the mother comes back and the baby is still crying and can't continue on with whatever activity it was doing, then that is an anxious attachment style. And the avoidant attachment style is when the mother leaves, the baby doesn't, the mother comes back, and the baby still doesn't cry. That is the avoidant. Those are the three attachment styles. And basically, there is a little bit of limitations on the study just because it was happened after World War II. And so women had previously been in the workforce and now they were forced back into their caretaking roles. And this was a little bit of a way to, I think, kind of guilt trip mothers into, staying at home again and really taking care of the children. And because of this impact that it has, if you are not present as a parent and if you don't tend to the needs of the kid, then this is what will happen and it will affect their lifetime, which is a little bit of an unfair expectation to put on women. But it was an interesting study on just how attachment styles formulate and also how they impact the rest of your life. Because when you are anxious, you are ruminating on things, you are constantly thinking somebody is going to leave you. And then avoidance are more of that independent creature, but also feels things deeply, but is scared to show them out of fear of being vulnerable and things like that. So I think this attachment theory is really interesting because it shows how you attach to other people in your life. And career are all about relationship building and bonding and cultivating and nurturing relationships for your growth and your development. And so, how does your attachment style impact that? Is what I really wanted to underscore in this episode. Because I think part of the thing about having stable relationships is it gives you that sense of security, which enables you to explore and take risks. And when you are insecure in your relationships and with people and trusting, then you have these protection strategies, which can actually hinder you from your growth and development. And so, how many of us are actually building careers from protection? And how are we limiting ourselves because of our fear of trusting other people? And so that's what I really wanted to talk about in this episode is about, are we secure in our relationships and how is that affecting our growth and development in the different landscapes of our life? So, just a little bit of an interesting topic and a little bit of inspiration on how you can reflect on your own relationships, especially during this love themed time that is Valentine's Day. The two types of people in their 20s. And obviously, this is a gross generalization, and there's definitely more than two types of people. I mean, everybody's on a spectrum. That's the whole point of identities and relationships and whatever it is, mental health, is that we're all on a spectrum. But I'm just going to dwindle it down for the sake of the story of two people. And so one of them is the hyper independent one, which is they think that networking is kind of cringy. I don't need a mentor. I don't need anyone. I don't need support. I can do this from the ground up by myself. But really, they're struggling alone quietly. And then you have the over researcher, which pulls everyone, wants to know what everybody else is doing, wants to see how everybody else has lived their life, wants to question every single commitment that they make, wants to get everybody else's opinion on if they're living their life correctly, whatever it might be. And then they still can't make a decision. Both of these people are, smart, ambitious, and also stuck. And it showcases the different attachment styles, where the hyper independent one is that avoidant nature, and then the over researcher is that anxious attachment. And I wanted to bring a little bit of science into this just because I think when we learn about the brain, it can really educate us and become the foundation of just awareness about what's going on in our brain that actually happens when we have these attachment styles. Because when we understand what's going on in the brain, then we can understand how to change it, because awareness is the foundation of change. It brings us clarity so that we can acknowledge what we're doing and what our actions might be in the future. I found this study from Georgetown University, this article, which is what happens to the brain when you fall in love and in a relationship. And what it does is it kicks in the reward circuit, which is the mesolimbic system. And this heightens dopamine levels, which is that motivation, go get it kind of thing, that novelty seeking feeling that we get. And it also heightens cortisol, which is related to stress. This is high stakes kind of mentality, because when you are formulating that love and relationship, it's new, it's scary. You don't know what the other person is thinking. You don't know what's happening. And it's not to say that cortisol is bad, but it does heighten that level of stress. I thought this was interesting because I've talked about dopamine and cortisol before in these episodes and just how they're related to your career. It's really interesting that when we do something new, if we embrace a new passion, if we have this idea that we want to do, or if we have a job that we want to go after, it also elevates the dopamine and cortisol levels. So it's interesting how when you are pursuing love and you're also pursuing a new career aspect or identity or whatever you're doing, it heightens the same neurotransmitters. And then also, once you're in a longer term relationship, from the study, it said that this commitment that a lot of us are so scared of, or a lot of us crave, it actually helps that stability. It releases oxytocin, which helps formulate trust and regulation and also bonding in people. And so when you have that long-term relationship and commitment levels, then the oxytocin is released. And your brain treats this committed relationship and that commitment level the same as it does with jobs, career pivots, and rejection, just like relationship events. What also happens during this early attachment is that our serotonin levels are dipping, which is the regulating the mood. So we tend to over ruminate, we tend to become more anxious. And it's why we obsess and panic and withdraw and spiral over tons of things. And that is attachment energy. When we are embracing something new, whether it be love or career or emotions or whatever it is, your brain treats it the same because it is an attachment energy. And I just think this is so interesting because a lot of the times we talk about attachment theory with love and relationships, but it also affects the same circuits as your career energy and your passions. Because fundamentally, when you are in a relationship, it is the passionate energy. And also, when you're going into your career, if you are looking at it from a lens of something that you want to do and something that you want to pursue, it's the same kind of mentality, which I thought was just so interesting because I think about it in my life and my relationships and my career. I tend to be really passionate about what I'm doing a lot of the times. And I sense that my nervous system is releasing the same amounts of fear pursuing a relationship the same way I fear pursuing a new career aspect or landscape. And it's interesting because whenever I accept a new job or whenever I go into a new term, and this has happened since I was a little child, where I go into middle school or whatever it was, and I'd feel so overwhelmed. And I was scared of this novelty and I was scared of what change that it might bring. And also, I was scared of if I would like my teachers, if I would like my new coworkers, if I would like the new thing, and why was I doing this? I wouldn't enjoy it as much as I thought. And I was also scared that maybe the people wouldn't like me. And it was just all these feelings, which I feel that are very similar to when you get into a new relationship. It's the butterflies. It's, oh, is the person going to like me? Have they texted me? What is the duration of text? And, whatever it is that happens in relationships, I'm definitely no expert. And now I'm going on a tangent. I also feel like it's interesting how being overwhelmed is such a negative emotion and it's something that we don't want to feel. However, I feel like it's an important emotion because it signals that you are changing. Being overwhelmed is the effect of change. When we understand that it isn't a negative thing, it's just a byfactor of changing and growing and evolving, then I feel like we can embrace it with so much more gratitude that, oh my gosh, like because we are changing, we get to feel this new emotion. We get to feel new things. We get to experience novelty. And how beautiful is that to experience new things and change and evolve? But I also just wanted to go into two other studies that I found about attachment theory and career. And so they did a case study in Czech where they researched 21-year-olds. And so I do want to preface that these findings are on the Czech demographic. So it doesn't mean that it can be used to other demographics, but I do think it was interesting to learn about. And what they found on the impact of attachment theories on emerging adults was that when you have secure attachment, you have a higher vocational identity. You have a clearer sense of direction on where you want to head, which means that they were able to explore more and have confidence and also have true independence, that they weren't defensive, but they could also rely on people. Whereas if you had more of an avoidant attachment, you were very independent and anxious. You had very high cognitive load and that you were overthinking a lot of the times. The main interesting factor that I found from this study is that over time, your parent child relationships becomes less significant, but your romantic partner relationship becomes more important and it matters more, that stability. And so when we are disconnecting relationships and career, I actually think it's hindering us from seeing the big picture overall. Romantic relationships and friendships really do affect your career because you're putting that mental energy and investing that energy and time into those relationships, which lessens your energy for your career and your development. So when you have somebody that you can rely on securely and that is helpful for your growth and development, that really impacts and cascades into your career landscape. So I think it's important to develop relationships that will nurture you and nurture your career growth and not prohibit you. Another study that I found was conducted in China, and this one talked all about self-differentiation and how your attachment theory affects that self-differentiation, which is your psychological immune system. Basically translated in, can you handle other people's expectations without losing yourself, as well as self-efficacy, that belief in your own capacity to do something. And so when you have that secure attachment, you have a really strong internal compass. You know what you want, you know the direction. Other people can't reroute you as easily. And also, you've built that sense of self. You are confident in who you are that you believe that you can do what you put your mindset to. So, how did these case studies show up in our career? Being avoidant, you don't ask questions, you don't build that network. But in a landscape, especially in your career where your net worth is your network, this really affects you because I feel that society glorifies being independent, the go get it girl or being that boss energy, not needing to depend on anyone. But really, in our careers, it is so important to build a network. And people in business talk about this everywhere. Your currency lies in your networking. And being able to get a job really relies on being able to network. And so when you are avoidant and when you have this hyper independence and when you feel that you are that lone wolf mentality, you're actually hindering yourself from growing and expanding. I saw this video of this person who says that if you aren't playing the game, which is networking basically, and doing the coffee chats and asking questions and meeting new people, then you're actually letting other people win. You're letting other people get ahead of you. That's why other people are, 10 steps ahead of you, even though you have the qualifications, because you're not utilizing these resources. And so when you are avoidant, you have that slower growth and they struggle in the long term because they're not gaining that support system that can help leverage you and catapult you into wherever you want to go. And then on the other hand, it's the anxious person constantly outsourcing. What do you think I should do? Do you think this is the right step in my career? And they're consumed by this comparison and they're not using comparison as inspiration, but they're using it as a tool to measure themselves against. And they also have this choice paralysis, especially nowadays with so many options available to us. They're constantly outsourcing which one to do from other people. They're not understanding what their core values are, and they're not coming from a place of this is inherently important and valuable to me. Whereas they're looking at what is important to other people, what looks better to other people, and that's what I should do. And so it's having that high effort but low clarity. And they have no internal compass. They don't really have that psychological immune system. They can't handle other people's expectations. They're constantly losing themselves. And so that's how attachment theory really shows up in your career, because security doesn't mean dependency. It means that you have a stable base. And I think this is a very common misconception, is that sometimes we feel that when we are so on board and we have something that we want to achieve and we ask somebody, could you help connect me with this other person? Or I'm on board with this task. I'm on board with this project. That sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, they're dependent on me now. But no, it's just that stable base energy that they are committed to this job, this place, and that they're willing to work for it. And that doesn't mean that they're dependent on you. That just means that they are committed to it. So don't mistake onboarding and being committed as dependency. And I think this is something that I'm still working on, is that just because you ask for help, it doesn't mean that you're dependent on these people. It just means that you're allowing yourself to show your vulnerabilities in order to learn from other people's experiences and grow from there. And having that stable relationship is really the fundamental foundation to having that clear identity. When you have that security, it creates that base that you can explore from there, because you know that you can have somebody that you can come back to and share these learnings and these tools, and maybe have somebody to support you along the way. Likewise, you will be supporting them. And that's why I feel like you don't need to have it all together to grow. You can be unfinished, or you can be in the process of becoming. I mean, this is what this podcast is all about. We are constantly evolving and growing as people, and we don't have to have it from the get-go at the beginning. We can be in the process of becoming and developing while still being ambitious. And that's why I feel like in this time where you are becoming, this is such a beautiful moment, because you don't need to have it all together. You don't need to know where you're going next. You just have to be so confident in your self-sense and your values, because when you have those clear values, that's where clarity can stem from. That's where it can feel easier to do things and know what you're doing, because you know that you're coming from a place that is valuable and significant to you. So definitely check out my personal branding episode, because I talk a lot about how to identify those core values. And I just think it is really that base for clarity. But I hope this all makes sense. And I know this is a little bit out of what I normally talk about, but I just think it's really interesting to start the conversation about how your relationships and how you are kind of wired impacts different facets of your life. So before I end this, I just want to do a little quick framework on how to use that awareness of your attachment styles into your career. The framework, which is secure. And so S stands for stabilizing that support, because this enables that experimentation. Think yourself, where are you emotionally right now? What are you feeling? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who could you go to become your mentor? And also, who are your peers? Just kind of understand where you are. And then E is examine your patterns, because when you have awareness of what you're doing, that can help enact change. Do you have more of a tendency to withdraw? Because that could mean you're more avoidant. Or do you spiral more? Do you constantly outsource information? That might mean you're more anxious. And then C is create that decision container. So if you are more avoidant, maybe go have that one mentor conversation. Maybe go have a coffee chat with people, learn, grow your network a little bit. If you're more anxious, maybe limit yourself to max 2 opinions and then decide. U is upgrade self-differentiation. So self-differentiation, again, is that psychological immune system, not letting other people's expectations impact you. So separate other people's fears from your desires, from your values. And then validate your emotions, understand where you're coming from, and then take action. Because in order to build that confidence, you have to understand and do those learnings and experience things, build that evidence. R is regulate yourself first. Decide from your values, understand where you're coming from. And also, if you are fearful of something, name it. Because when you are naming these things, I think it takes away the power it has over you. And then E finally is engineer that environment. Because there's a saying of that you become like the 5 people you surround yourself. And so it's really important that you choose wisely. Who are the people that are energizing you versus who is depleting you? Are you expanding yourself, or are you actually just comparing yourself to other people? It's interesting how your attachment style impacts different facets of your life, not just love and relationships. And also that your attachment style isn't your personality. It is protective mechanisms that you have developed because of a fundamental fear that you have, either being left or feeling that you are too much or that you're scared of commitment, whatever it is. But when you build a secure attachment style, you build stability and security. And that's where clarity follows. That's where you are able to take more risks. That's where you have a more aligned career. And secure people don't need certainty, they need stability. And you can build that. You can change your attachment style. I think a really good book to read if you want to change your attachment style is called Attached. Are you anxious, avoidant, or secure? How the science of adult attachment can help you find and keep love. And this is by Amir Levine and also Heller. So that's a great book to read. If you are more anxious or avoidant, or even both, how can you change that? Because you can change these things. This is what is so great about humans, is that we have neuroplasticity. Our brains are neuroplastic. We can change them if we put in the work to do so, if we build the habits around that. Because remember, where your attention goes, energy flows. And what you don't fire, you can't rewire. And so we have the ability to change, and we can do that in a healthy way. This is definitely the start of a conversation about how relationships are so important in our career, whether that be romantic relationships, friendships, professional relationships. I mean, they're all so fundamental to our careers and our development. I hope this episode was just interesting. I think it's just not talked about enough about how our attachment styles actually filter into our career landscape. And so I think it's just an interesting conversation to have. And I know I was inspired by it just because of Valentine's Day and how love affects us in different aspects. But I'll be continuing on the career upskilling ones. I know I said in the previous episode that I would do one about embodiment and AI, which I still will, but I just thought this was an interesting one. So yeah, so if there's one key takeaway from this episode, it's just, how is your attachment style impacting your career? Is it hindering your growth, or is it helping your growth? So I just want to leave you on that note, and definitely subscribe, comment below what your thinkings are. Let me know your attachment style. Let me know how you think it impacts your career and also different aspects of your life. I love to hear them. I read each and every comment. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.